5-minute warning. We'll start in 5 minutes.
Okay.
Can everybody take their seats? All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you to those that traveled from Iowa City to be here tonight. Obviously, you didn't come to see me. You came to hear our illustrious speaker Tonight's program, like so many other good things we do, is made possible by the All-in-One campaign. The 2022 All-in-One campaign theme is Do Good That Goes Everywhere. And it's easy to do good that goes everywhere through our Jewish Federation. With your gifts to the All-in-One campaign, your help continues to bring security resources to our campus and to the community. Invest in educational programs like Gan Shalom, Beit Sefer Shalom, and Engman Camp Shalom, PJ Library, and student-to-student programs. We also provide care to our most vulnerable friends and neighbors through Jewish Family Services. We build bridges to combat anti-Semitism, advocate, educate, collaborate, and mobilize through the Jewish community relations, and educate individuals and schools through Holocaust educational workshops. We connect with Israel and the Jewish peoplehood through our partnership together, protect and strengthen our home right here at Casp Terrace, and prepare for the future with the Des Moines Jewish Foundation, and so much more. Friends, you may not meet the people whose lives that you're changing through your support, but we want to thank you on their behalf, because the impact of your generosity is felt every day by so many across the Jewish community. If you've already made your 2022 gift to the All-in-One campaign, thank you. If you've made your gift and want to give more, thank you. And if you haven't given yet, Bob has pledge cards in the back, so please find Bob or other staff members and grab a pledge card today and make your pledge and give a donation. And now I'd like to introduce Hen Mazzig. Yossi Klein Halevi, author and senior fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute, said, Hen Mazzig has emerged as one of the seminal voices of his generation, morally uncompromising. He passionately defends Israel even as he chastises it for its failures. Proud, fearless, eloquent, Hen Mazzig is precisely the right kind of Jew for our time. Maddie Friedman, author and New York Times contributor, said Hen Mazzig is the most dynamic young voice working to fill in the most glaring blank spots in the picture of Jews in Israel. The story of Jews from the Islamic world are better because of Hen. For decades, Hen Mazzig has been an educator on Jews with a focus in the Middle East and North Africa, and credited by historians as the founder of Mizrahi Heritage Month. Mazzig has appeared as an expert on Jewish issues on 4 continents, over 500 college campuses, the BBC, Sky News, TED Talks, and countless Shabbat dinners. Mazzig's writings has appeared in the Los Angeles Times, Newsweek, NBC News, Haaretz, The Forward, Jewish Chronicle, International Business Times, and numerous other publications. Hen was named top 100 people positively influencing Jewish life in 2018 and 2021, the top 50 online pro-Israel influencers, and top 50 LGBTQ+ influencers. For his advocacy, he has recently was awarded Camera's Portrait and Courage Award. Hen Mazzig's first book, The Wrong Kind of Jew, was released in 2022, which I believe you can get in back after he speaks. Hen is a prominent digital influencer with over 100 million users. Over 100 million users have interacted with his content, while his Instagram has a higher engagement rate than Kim Kardashian, Cristiano Ronaldo, and Nike. He has authored numerous viral campaigns such as #JewPrivilege, where he inspired others to speak out about the falsehood of Jews having advantages in modern society, and #JewishLooking, where thousands of Jews celebrated the ethnic and racial diversity of our community. In 2019, Mazzig co-founded the Tel Aviv Institute, a nonprofit dedicated to using data-driven social media strategies to stand up for Jewish people and other minorities online. As the Institute's senior fellow, he has trained a dynamic roster of Jewish advocates in messaging and empowers a new generation of Jews to use publications like Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and other new media to advocate for tolerance and peace. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Hen Mazzig.
Hi, can you hear me? The mic is on, okay, great. Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us tonight, joining me. very excited to be in Des Moines. I never thought I'd get here, so I'm turning it up. Yeah, but I'm so excited that I'm here. I'm not. Oh, okay, right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Is it okay? I'll raise my voice a bit. I'll use my outside voice. So after this introduction, I don't have anything else to say. Thank you for that. But I'll speak to you today about a bit about my family, a bit about growing up in Israel, some of my work today, and if I don't get to speak about the elections in Israel, please ask me about that at the end, because we don't want to leave this elephant in the room without addressing it. But I always start with the story of my family. That's most of what my book was about, The Wrong Kind of Jew. I do have a few copies later, and if you don't get one tonight, you can order it on Amazon. But in my book, I started writing first and foremost about my family story, because I think that for us, for Jewish people, history and telling stories is such an integral part of who we are. That's how we survive, by telling the stories of our ancestors and passing them on from generation to generation. And I feel like it's such a central part of my identity, the story of my family. And my family came to Israel in the early 50s. My family from my mother's side came to Israel from Iraq, from Baghdad. Baghdad, Iraq in general, had one of the most ancient Jewish communities. They actually refer to themselves today not as Iraqi Jews, rather as Babylonian Jews, because they lived in Iraq since before it was Iraq, since it was Babylon. My grandparents lived there for a long time as a protected minority. Being protected minority in Iraq means that you are a dhimmi, that's what it means in Arabic. And being a dhimmi means that you are protected as long as the ruler wants to protect you. So once that ended in 1941, when the Farhud happened, those 2 days of violent attacks against the Jews of Iraq, everything changed for them. They felt like the land that they were standing on was just pulled out underneath their feet, where when during those 2 days in June, thousands of Jewish people have been injured and attacked in those massive attacks that were inspired by Nazis, but were actually conducted by Iraqis, by Arabs, and they knew that they had to plan their escape. It took them 10 years to save enough money that they thought that they can leave, and then in 1951, after since I wasn't really speaking about the Farhud as in a graphic way, because I want to spare it from you, but my grandmother saw some of the worst things that you can think about, including seeing her best friend being raped and killed for being Jewish in the streets by an Arab policeman, and seeing a mother and her children being killed in the streets for being Jewish. So that's what really made them understand that they have to have an escape plan. And back then, 40s, the 50s, there wasn't anywhere else for Jews to go. And in 1951, the Iraqi government is releasing this new law that they're saying, if you're Jewish, we will encourage you to leave the country and give up your citizenship, and you can go to Israel. Something like that is unheard of for a country to tell a minority, you can leave the country and give us your citizenship. But it happened to the Jewish community. And from a community of 150,000 Jews, 150,000 people that were there, as I said, since Babylon. The Rambam, Maimonides, was writing the Talmud and all of the holy texts that we're following today in Iraq, in Babylon. All of this was just erased in a second. And today there's not even one single Jewish person alive in Iraq. And when my grandparents were arriving to the airport in Iraq, thinking that they're going to go home with their property, with whatever they could take and whatever they saved, the Iraqi government police officers were there taking everything away from them. They left, every family could have had only one suitcase. My grandmother had to keep some clothes for the kids and everything she could. The only thing she kept for herself was one dress that she really liked and was hoping to wear it again. And they arrived to Israel as refugees on this short plane flight that they went to Cyprus, and then from Cyprus to Israel. They were refugees, they had no state, they had no land, and that's such a familiar story for the Jewish community. At the same time, my family from my father's side are facing very similar reality in Tunisia. During the Holocaust, we know a lot about, well, we know, but the world doesn't know enough about the Holocaust, and I think that's something we have to work to change. But even what they do know usually is about what happened in Europe, because for obvious reasons, the atrocities that happened to the Jewish community in Europe are far worse than anything. I mean, it's the worst genocide in modern history, or at all. But the Holocaust didn't just happen in Europe. The Nazis expanded to other lands, and they have reached Tunisia. And in Tunisia, it was the Nazi Vichy regime, the French regime, that was controlling Tunisia. My grandparents had to work in forced labor camps of the Nazis. And then I think that was also the realization that they're not safe. Another point about the Middle East, and I think it's important because I jumped over it. We're looking at the Middle East today, and we're looking at it as seeing all those Arab countries and all those Muslim countries, and we think that they existed there forever, but it's not the reality. The Arab world today is a result of imperialism. And we're often, when we speak about imperialism, I feel like people don't really know the definition of imperialism. Someone can help me with some ideas. How would you define imperialism? Someone can, no? Okay, so I'll define it. But it's important because I think we're hearing that a lot in regards to Israel and the Middle East. So empires are superpowers that are expanding their control beyond their borders, and they're often doing it with colonizing other lands and taking resources and oppressing other people outside of their borders, right? That's how the Middle East became an area that has predominantly Arab and Muslim countries. It's not criticism of their existence, but it's a criticism of what imperialism is. And the best way to recognize an empire is by language. And then you can trace it to the source, right? So the reason that so many countries speak English is because of the English Empire. The reason that so many countries speak Spanish or French or Arabic is because there is an imperial force that is forcing other communities to speak those languages or forms of them. And I think that's really important when we're talking about Israel and about this area, because Israel is a nation state and the Arab world is an imperial one. And there's my family, from my father's side, are part of the Mazzig people. They're also known as the Berbers, but they reject this term because it's a European invention that is very degrading to this community to say that they are barbarians, basically. But the Mazzig people are the most indigenous people to North Africa, the first inhabitants of North Africa. And there was about 5,000 Mazzig Jews. And some historians are debating whether or not they were always Jews or some of them converted. And there's one story that I really enjoy because I think you'll understand why, that I really want to believe that it's true, is that there was an Mazzig Jewish queen. Her name was El Kahina, which in Arabic means the Kohen or the priest. And she was leading those tribes when the Muslim armies were expanding towards North Africa and fighting those Mazzig people, and El Kahina was actually fighting them. And the Muslim one of the Muslim scholars, Ibn Calderon, was saying that she was a witch, a Jewish witch, and that's why she was the only one that was able to stop Muhammad's armies. She ended up, after 10 years, she was defeated, and she committed a suicide because she said she doesn't want to convert because she knew that this will happen. She said, I want to be Jewish, and she died this way. And the belief of this specific historian that was discussing it is that her kids, she had 3 kids, Jewish kids, that became part of the Mazzig. They continue to be part of the Mazzig people, and those are the Mazzig Jews that we know today, that my father was part of. So there was 5,000 of them living in Tunisia. But going back to my grandparents, they suffered a lot from the Nazi control of Tunisia. But after the Nazi control was finished, they thought things would go back to normal, but it didn't. From 1940 and on, more and more legislations against the Jewish community took place. They banned Jewish Association, they banned the Rabbinical Council from existing, they dismantled them. They didn't allow any Jewish sports teams to take place, and at some point they even destroyed completely the Jewish quarter in Tunis, in the capital of Tunisia. And that was really the time for this Jewish community to live. So in Tunisia you had 105,000 Jews until 1940, and then today there's less than 1,000. The situation is a bit better, and there's some relationship between Israel and Tunisia, but it's still nothing that we can celebrate. So the reason that this is part of my identity today is because my family really came to Israel with nothing. They came with the clothes to their backs, and they were hoping that they are going to arrive for a better future. And it was still difficult for them, and there were so many challenges that they experienced. But I think that when I'm speaking today on my family's story and what happened to them on college campuses, I was just in UC Berkeley last week and UCLA and spoke at so many college campuses, and I constantly get this pushback as if Jews have nothing to do with this land, and that's really important that we address this, because all Jews come from the land of Israel. Every people started somewhere, right? And Jewish people, while we had one of the longest diasporas of every people, we've been scattered around the world and adopted some of the characteristics of the places that we've been at, or we helped develop some of those cultures, like my family and their my ancestors that helped developing Middle Eastern cuisine that we all enjoy, that today is Israeli cuisine. But all Jews were once, all Jews come from the Middle East. We are all Middle Eastern people in that sense. And if we talk about indigeneity, a dear friend of mine, she's an indigenous Native American Jewish woman. There were mixed marriage between Sephardi Jews that arrived in Mexico to the native communities, and she's a descendant of them. And she really helped me understand and see how Jewish indigeneity is such an integral part of who we are. You know, indigenous people, Native American, every Friday they invite the spirits into their homes, the angels, and they're telling them, sit with us and bless us and then leave, which is something that all Jews are doing every Friday dinner when we invite the angels of peace to our home and asking them to bless us and telling them to leave. Or how they take 4 different species of plants and wave it to 6 directions of the wind, which is something that every Jewish person that celebrates Sukkot would probably know. And you are indigenous to a place as long as you are maintaining the connection to this place. So as long as you have the connection to this place that you started from. And Jews have this connection by facing Jerusalem every time we pray 3 times a day. And we have this when we get married and break the glass and we remember Jerusalem. We have an indigenous connection to this land, and as long as we maintain it, as long as we have our Jewish identity, and the only way that you can lose this indigenous identity, this indigenous connection and indigenous rights for your land is by severing this connection. So if you are becoming an anti-Zionist, you lose the indigenous title to this. It doesn't mean that, I'm being careful, but just by the definition, you are no longer indigenous to an area. So that's an interesting part. But I do think that the Jewish community must see itself as a Middle Eastern, originating from the Middle East. We have been in a diaspora for so long, but we all come from there. This is our roots. Mizrahi Jews, Mizrahi in Hebrew means Eastern. Mizrahi Jews, this community that has lived in the Middle East and North Africa for so long, are just the evidence that we were all there. And by the way, even though they lived in the Middle East, they didn't live in Israel. They were still in exile away from our home. But I think it's so important for us to recognize that and to speak about this and to share these stories with other people to help them understand. When we speak today about Jewish identity in the West, people don't know if are you white, are you Middle Eastern, are you religious, are you just a religion, are you just an ethnicity, are you a race? We have so many people really don't know what to make of us, and I think the most important thing is that we are indigenous to the land of Israel. That should, for me at least, it's the anchor of my identity, that this is where we come from, and this is where we're still connected to and still maintain what it means to be Jewish. I served in the Israeli army for 5 years. when I was 18, I had to join the army, and while most of my friends went to do went and joined combat units because we grew up with seeing terror attacks, and it's something that makes everyone want to do something to defend your homeland. And I remember that my grandmother told me when I was researching for the book how, they left Iraq and they got to Israel and they thought that that they're going to be safe in Israel, but the trauma that they had from Iraq continued and was brought to Israel as well in the form of terror attacks. But also in 1991, during the Gulf War, when Saddam Hussein was launching rockets on Israel, those rockets fell in Ramat Gan area, which has a high population of Iraqi Jews. So even this escape in Iraq was still chasing them in a sense. And I think growing up with those stories and growing up with terror makes Israelis feeling much more obligated to do something to protect their land, and that's why most of my friends went and joined combat units. I decided to join the humanitarian unit of the Israeli army, the Kogat unit, that works to help Palestinian civilians on the other side in the West Bank, and I served in Hebron, Ramallah, and Jerusalem periphery. My job was to be in charge of coordinating with the international organizations, with the UN, the Red Cross, all the international organizations that are operating in the West Bank, and promote infrastructure projects to promote building of hospitals, taking care of Palestinian civilians. There was one Palestinian kid that one time when I served in Hebron that picked up an unexploded device and it exploded and he needed immediate assistance. So I was the only one able to coordinate between the UN, the Palestinian Authority, make sure that this kid would be brought into Israel where he would be taken care of in Israeli hospital. And that's the job of this unit, was to save life. And by the way, the kid is safe, and I went to visit him and his family after actually just 3 years ago, right before COVID, and they still really, whenever they see me, they're so happy to see me. And I think through this work, I was able to build bridges and promote peace. After my military service, I served for 5 years. I served as an openly gay commander, which was also something that I'm very proud of. I think that Israel has a lot of work to do in so many issues, and it's very important that we recognize that Israel is not perfect, but it has made some massive advancements, specifically in terms of human rights and dignity for minorities, and I really hope that we're not going to go back on those advancements. And after my military service, I just traveled to America and worked with Jewish communities, and I realized that there's a real assault in many places on the Jewish community. Even if it's not physical, it's still violent. It's still, we saw it with Kanye West just a week ago with his statements, but it's not just Kanye West, it's coming from everywhere. And I feel like Jewish people are feeling that they need to be ashamed of their identity, or we need to hide it, and it's really the opposite of what we need to do. The more proud we are, and the more we speak about our identity, and the more we show other people what it means to be Jewish, the easier it becomes. I just came back from a lab. Tel Aviv Institute is training social media influencers to speak up about Jewish identity. And there was such a fear in the audience when we were working on what it means to be Jewish online. They said, we don't want to speak about that because we know that people are not going to like it, or people are going to attack us. And it's legitimate fear. I'm getting so many death threats and attacks on a daily basis online. But if we are not speaking up, no one's going to speak up for us. And sometimes we see here and there glimpse of support, but I think it's really up to us to speak up and to celebrate Jewish joy, and not just to speak about anti-Semitism. I saw that the Kanye West thing just got so much attention, but many in the Jewish community were just complaining on how anti-Semitic it is. And it's important to call it out, but it's also important for us to celebrate Jewish joys, to invite people to Friday dinners and to teach them about our Jewish identity and what it means to be Jewish, and the beautiful traditions that we have. I think that would really make a difference for our community. And I can go on and on, but I want to leave some time for questions. And I also want to read you a part of my book, and then so I'll read you the part of my book. Then we'll have questions, and yeah, and I hope you have a lot of questions. So, okay, so I'm just going to read to you one part from my book. We have a few copies, as I said, for after. Okay. I'm bad at meeting the appropriate narrative. I can't tell my story of beating back hatred against Jews, about the millennia of survivals my ancestors went through, without mentioning that Mizrahi Jews still face inequalities today. I'm not the kind of Jew who keeps our dirty laundry off the clothesline, but I'm certainly not the kind of Jew who wants to hang our people out to dry. I'm not a silent Jew. I'm not a blanket to give the cover to anti-Semites. Bigots cannot buy my silence, even at the price of acceptance. I'm not a Jew who chooses politics over truth. Who will protect my friends over my people? I will not kneel before any movement when they refuse to offer Jews a seat at the table. No matter how polite they appear, I refuse to appease bigots, even when they offer me solidarity. When I feel rejected by the Jewish society, I don't score for acceptance from their adversaries. I am not their good Jew, for I know there are no good Jews to anti-Semites. There is nothing good about being Jewish to them. However, a Jew pushing hateful ideology against our own people is useful. And I ask, why be useful when you can be a bad Jew? So yeah, that's part of my book, and thank you. And I'd love to take some questions and for you to direct the conversation on topics that you want to ask me about or issues that you want to speak about.
All right, so raise your hand if you have a question, Benjamin, and you can use the microphone so everybody can hear questions.
Yeah, it should be yes.
Hello,
Hi.
my name is Shoshana. I guess I have two questions, and I'm not sure they're entirely related. But my first question is just more an observation about being a leftist Jew who also believes that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish homeland. I find that in the social circles that I occupy, I'm leftist, I'm queer. All my friends are very radical in a lot of ways, but there also is rampant misunderstanding to the point of willful ignorance, I guess, about the Jewish experience, and it's very alienating. I often find that I have to silence parts of myself and code switch quite a bit, and I've, in recent months, to a couple of years, I just turned 40, and I've just crossed a threshold into not really caring so much, and so I tend to be a lot more outspoken now amongst friends. So I guess my question is more about how to navigate those spaces and not tokenize yourself and be a resource, but also protect your peace. And then my second question is about your comments about indigeneity, because I'm very curious about that. I am not a religious Jew. I identify culturally and ethnically as Jewish. And your remarks about what defines an indigenous identity in Jews, what does that look like for people like me who don't have a very strong connection to the rituals and practices, but still feel a connection to the heritage?
Well, thank you for the comments and for being brave enough to not give up, because I know how often when you're in a social circle, when everyone rejects your identity or tell you that you need to alter yourself, you can go one of two ways. You can either become stronger in who you are and your identity, and I promise you people would follow, or you can just escape it. And many Jews are, not many, but some Jews decide to just leave their Jewish identity in exchange for becoming more acceptable by some social circles, but they're not really accepted if it's in the cost of leaving behind their Jewish identity. In regards to the indigeneity, so indigenous, the term indigenous means being people with a certain culture that has been in exile, or the land has been controlled by another force, by an imperial force. And the question is really where you started as people. Religious and religious practices for for Jewish people are often being misinterpreted into, to make it similar to so that Christian audience can understand that. And our religious is very different than Christianity. It's not, our religious practices are very different than Christianity, Islam, and others. Although there's similar foundations for sure, but we're not a religious in the sense. So you're still Jewish, even if you don't keep Shabbat, and even if you don't keep kosher, or even if you don't keep any of the mitzvahs, you're still Jewish, right? And that's the main difference, that in other religions it doesn't happen. The practices of Judaism are just a way to practice what it means to be Jewish, as long as you maintain your connection to the land, which can manifest itself with praying towards Jerusalem, or manifest itself through thinking about Jerusalem, or it can manifest itself by visiting there, or by having conversations in your social circles with people that really don't like that you are Jewish and that you have this connection, and still speaking up. That is the strongest way to manifest it in my eyes. So it means that you still have indigenous connection to this land, as long as you are Jewish. And I'll say that being a gay person, and you mentioned you're queer, and I'm sure you can relate to how we are feeling that we are rejected for our identity, for being LGBTQ so often by people that are not part of it, or people that are not allies. And I think that really was what helped me form my thinking around being Jewish. I think that Harvey Milk said that if a bullet would kill him, he hopes that this bullet would open every door of every closet of every gay person around the world. And he said that only when we come out as who we are fully, it doesn't matter if we're LGBTQ or Jewish or whatever we are, only when we come out and we accept who we are, then the world sees that we are everywhere. And I want Jews to come out. I want Jews to be open and proud, and not hide, and not feel ashamed. There's nothing to be ashamed of. And only when we come out as Jewish, only when we tell the world we're Jewish, people will know that we are their friends, that we are their employers, that we are the person that they see in the grocery store. We are everywhere. And when we are everywhere, we are human again, and we can fight this campaign to dehumanize us. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Oh, yeah, it's gonna give you a mic.
I wanted to ask about the dimension of diasporic cultures that you described. And one of the things that I've seen online that I have found disturbing, well, I've been offline for almost a year because I couldn't take it anymore. And I've been pretty
I'm sure many can relate.
outspoken online, and definitely was punished for that several times. But the thing that I've noticed is that anti-Zionist commenters have become more savvy in the sense of, reluctantly accepting that, okay, well, Mizrahi Jews are probably indigenous, or might be indigenous, or more indigenous, but how do you explain the Ashkenazim? And, I've seen all kinds of made-up theories, like they're Goths, originally, or, just all these bizarre ideas about who the Ashkenazim are. And I think that there's no more tenuous claim to indigeneity for any of the cultural groups of Jews than there are for Ashkenazim, because U.S. anti-Zionists frame the whole Israel-Palestine conflict through the lens of racialization, just like they see everything in the United States. And so they've taken that same lens and applied it to Jews as a group as well. And it's kind of this, it seems like this divide and conquer strategy. Okay, you Mizrahim, you're okay because a lot of you are a little more brown, but how do you explain these white Jews over here? So.
So I've seen that as well, and I think it's terrible, and that's why I'm making it clear that Mizrahi Jews, while we are we've stayed in the Middle East, all Jews originated from this land, and even though we lived in the Middle East, we were still in diaspora, and the same it goes back to the point on Jewish people having such a long diaspora that we have developed and changed some of the characteristics. We all have the same story, and we probably have the same, I mean, we do have the same core of what it means to be Jewish, but we just added different ideas from other places. The point is that every country I go to, and I was, when I'm in South Africa, it's Israel's apartheid. In America, it's Israel's racist. In Canada, it's Israel genocide, indigenous people. In England, they're talking about Israel being imperial colonial country. And it's like every country, instead of dealing with their own past, they're just putting it on us. And the way to deal with that, I think, is to dismantle those lies by telling the truth and sharing the truth. And the reason that I wrote this book, a lot of it was because of that, was because some anti-Zionist voices in America were using Mizrahi Jews and saying, oh, you guys are indigenous, but we're actually attacking those American white Jews, which is ridiculous and insane to use this term, because we understand that being Jewish as a minority in America makes you are deprived of the privilege that people that are part of the homogeny enjoy, which is you are reminded every Christmas, not that I have a problem with Christmas, but we are reminded every Christmas that this is still a Christian country, which again, I don't think we can debate that, but personally I think that there's no problem in having a Christian country or a Muslim country or a Jewish country, but it seems like everyone has a problem with this one Jewish country. And we're not really enjoying the privilege that they're trying to put on us, so I think it's very important to discuss that, and I discuss a lot of it in my book. So the answer is just to continue to speaking up. I know it's hard sometimes, and when you take a break, your mental health and your peace is the most important thing, but it's important to continue the conversations when you feel like you can do that.
Obviously, you're very prolific on social media. When was it that you found that people really started listening to you on social media, as opposed to just kind of speaking your mind and having kind of your own opinions, as opposed to kind of really having an impact on people's lives and people continuing to retweet or reshare your opinions and kind of use you as a voice, for themselves?
Yeah, I read this quote, I forgot the name of the rabbi that wrote that being an educator is about giving people the words to say the things that they know that they are true. And I think that's what I'm trying to do on social media, to give people words to describe their experiences. And the first chapter of my book is called Hating Hen, and it's all about all the hatred I've faced online. And I think that was the time that I realized that people are so angry with me. Maybe I should continue doing that. And every time I was speaking about my identity and about Israel and about against anti-Semitism, I would get so much pushback. I still get pushback constantly. But I remember there was this Palestinian activist from New York named Linda Sarsour, and she was constantly going fighting. Every tweet I would put out there, she would reshare it and twist my words. And then there was Mark Lamont Hill, the commentator from CNN, that was fired for saying something anti-Israel. He wrote a whole post about me and about how Mizrahi Jews are invented and we actually should be called Palestinians. Insanity. So then I think seeing all those people trying to discredit the things that I was saying really made me. There was in my bio that you read, there was a part about how I was credited by historians as the founder of Mizrahi Heritage Month. It sounds very positive, so I added it to my bio, but it's actually very negative because there were a group of professors, historians, Jewish ones, that wrote a whole piece about how I'm inventing Mizrahi identity and I invented Mizrahi Heritage Month and blaming me for Mizrahi identity. Ridiculous, I know, from George Washington University. Yeah, and saying that that I'm actually an Arab Jew. And maybe I'm sorry, I'm answering another question, but it's important because this term Arab Jews that was invented recently, there's no really mention of it before the last 10, 20 years. It's a term that subverts the Mizrahi identity so much because we were never Arabs. When we lived in Arab countries, we were Jewish, and we knew that we were Jewish. We were dhimmi. We didn't enjoy being part of the Arab country. So being Arab is a privileged identity in Arab countries because you are part of the homogeny. You are part of the majority. You can ride a horse. Jews could not ride a horse. Jews could not build a house that was taller than the house of a Muslim. They had all these restrictions for being Jewish, but they were not Arabs. And now people are using this term to say, oh, we actually belong in those Arab countries and we have no connection to Israel. We know that it's different, and we know that we were never Arabs and that we actually lived as minorities in these countries. And being an Arab means that you, again, are part of this imperial identity that we didn't enjoy. So it's very important. And I think it's very similar to how we shouldn't use the term European Jews, because we weren't European, we were Jews in Europe. But that's a different conversation. So going back to the question, I think the more I got attacked by people with 10 times my followers and bigger platforms, and Rashidat Lab coming back to she doesn't respond to many people, but every time I was answering her tweets, she was going into a fight with me, which was great. A sitting congresswoman is afraid of this Twitter guy from Petah Tikva. So that was, I really like that. So yeah, I think that's when I started realizing that I have and I also think that being progressive, and I truly am progressive, I truly do care about all those minorities and equality and all those minorities that I'm part of. I feel like we should live in a just and fair society for all people. I think it will also benefit us as Jews, but it will benefit me as an LGBTQ person. It will benefit me as son of refugees, as someone with parents that speak Arabic, as someone that does get stopped every time I come to America in the airport and being questioned. I do care about equality for all, and I think speaking from this place and leading with kindness really made a difference. I'm not. There's some Jewish voices online that are very angry, that are always attacking and getting upset with everyone. And it's fine, I get it. Like, yeah, I should be upset. There's a lot of anti-Semitism out there, and we should be upset. But I'm always thinking of how my words can help the Jewish people. And that's what I'm dealing with. So I think that's what made me an influencer, I guess, in this sense. Oh, well, okay.
So you coming here tonight is very timely. I've been struggling at work, at my place of work with having Jews recognized as their own unique identity, especially here in Iowa, as, something different than just a different religious group, which is often how we're thought of in Iowa with such a small Jewish population. So many of the talking points were things that I said as well. And I feel like I can stand up as a person and talk all day at people, but there's so much misinformation. I've encountered anti-Semitism, short of sending people straight to your Instagram and saying, just like, read this guy's, read everything he posts. Are there any good resources, good places to send people that I can use to support the things that I say and to try to, change some minds and educate people?
Yeah, I'm a big believer, I'm a firm believer in how we have to invite non-Jews into our spaces. I'm sure Bob would love to invite some of your friends to here for events, and include them, or invite them over for Friday dinner and explain to them. Every time we do Kiddush, I'm at home, back when I'm in London, we have friends over, but we always make sure that there's non-Jews around the table, and that we explain to them exactly why we're doing everything. And I do the whole spiel about indigeneity and the angels, and they love that, and they live that thinking that Jews are the coolest people on the planet, and they want to be a part of it. Make it, and that also to the question of how I became very successful on social media, it's about meeting people where they're at. we can't tell people, oh, you need to care about anti-Semitism because this and this. Maybe people are not in the place that they're mentally open enough to hear that. Maybe they want to first know what practices we're doing as Jews, or what is this holiday, or why are you lighting the candles? And when you speak to them about lighting the candles, not just inviting them for candle lighting for Hanukkah, which is going to be a great opportunity next month, but also explaining to them, this is what happened to us. This is a historical thing, and Jews are continuing for generations and generations upon generations. We're continuing to maintain, to remember what happened to us because it's such an integral part of our identity. And by the way, this all happened in Israel, where we live today, and that's part of our connection. This sort of things, I feel like, really make a difference to people's mind. And then the next stage would be to discuss with them anti-Semitic tropes and sending them to reading books about Jewish identity, about anti-Semitism. The ADL has a long list of anti-Semitic tropes that you can use for any situation there is a problem. I also think it's important to educate people why what they said was wrong, and not just calling them anti-Semitic. I think we live in a society that anti-Semitism is ingrained in it, and it exists. And the way that we work to change it is by educating people and not just saying, oh, Kanye West is an anti-Semite. Okay, that's fine. But let's educate people on why what he said is so anti-Semitic. To just brand people as something often would just get them turned away. There was one fashion blogger, a black fashion blogger from London, that had some anti-Semitic tweets online, and the Jewish community was very upset with this anti-Semitic tweets, rightfully so. Everyone condemned her. The Board of Deputies, it's the Jewish Federation in the UK, wrote a whole statement condemning this fashion blogger. And I sent her a direct message, and I said, it was just a year ago, and I said, listen, what you did was really awful, but I really want to speak to you about those actions and explain to you why it was bad. And she said, and she wrote to me that she's in tears, that I'm the only Jewish person that actually reached out to her to speak about that. We met, and she said those tweets were taken from like 10 years ago when she was 16, and she was quoting lines from Family Guy that were anti-Semitic, and she thought it was funny. And she understand how awful it was, but she was very young, and now she's in a different place, and she wants to change. And I offered her a way back, and we started meeting on a regular basis, and we watched videos, and we spoke about, she read books about Jewish identity and came to meet with me, and she became such an ally to the Jewish community today that otherwise, if it just stayed in the part of her being labeled as an anti-Semite, she would turn away, and she probably would turn into an even worse voice against the Jewish community than she was as a teenager. So really reach out to those people and try and educate them and be compassionate and lead with kindness. You can make a difference in people's life and make a difference for our community as well.
I know my good friend Ben Hockenberg wants to ask a question first, so I'm going to let him go first, please.
I'm curious about action and composition of leadership to combat anti-Semitism. So specifically, we live in Iowa, and you've had experience in various communities, college campus, other communities. You've got a pretty good grip on what is the best way to form alliances with other non-Jewish leadership to combat anti-Semitism. So could you relate some of your experiences of particular actions that have worked and align with other leaders in various venues that can influence the general population?
Yeah, I can. I think I often hear that in Jewish communities, or specifically with Jewish professionals that are working in this sphere. They would tell me, well, why isn't the black community supporting us? We march with Martin Luther King. Why are they showing up for us? And I think that the question is what have we done since Martin Luther King to show support for the black community? I think we've done a lot, but I think there's a lot more we still can do for the black community. And I think that it's more about not about how we can recruit those people to support us, but how we can be recruited to support them. Not out of the thinking that, oh, if we'll support this leader, maybe tomorrow they'll stand up against anti-Semitism, but rather being a real ally. That's what allyship is about. It's about showing up for other communities. And I see that in my work with so many other leaders in different communities, that they know that I'm Jewish, they know that I'm Israeli, and when they see me showing up for their causes, they want to show up for my cause. But I'm not doing it for that. I'm doing it because I do think that it's just and it's the right thing to do, to stand up for other minorities, because that's the best strategy that we can have as a minority as well. I know that we are, it's the best time to be Jewish in America, definitely, for a long time before, I think. Oh, wait, I mean, of course, with anti-Semitism, it's very difficult, but looking at the past, I mean, Jews are accepted into power and we are in very influential positions. But in the future, and we don't know what leaders and what leadership we're going to have in the future, we do need to have strong allies. We can't fight anti-Semitism alone. It was Rabbi Sachs that said that, it doesn't need non-Jews to care about anti-Semitism. He needs them to care about him, about Jews, about us. And that's, I think, is the really winning strategies, by being there for them, marching with them when standing up to hate, not engaging in hatred against other communities. I feel like that can make a big difference. And once a Jewish person, we call it at the Tel Aviv Institute, bat for the Jew. Whenever a Jewish person is saying something online that is really against other communities, it's been used because each of us are ambassadors. It shouldn't be like that. We're not a monolith. Not each of us are representing the whole Jewish community or spokespeople for Jews or for Israel, but unfortunately we are seen this way, and we have a big obligation and responsibility, and it's hard, but I always remind myself what my grandparents, and you should also remind yourself what your grandparents and ancestors went through. It was much harder than this. So that's a way for me to, and I hope that's good advice and good tip.
Not that I care about the Israeli electoral politics, but my good friend Brian Pearl here, he's really into it. And so I'm asking the question for him, and kind of like standing where we are today on the precipice of moving forward in Israel, what's your kind of explanation to people as you would encounter them now? I mean, at this point, as to where we're at today and how we got here.
I didn't want to speak about the elections, but you're twisting my arm. Well, I think the results are very interesting. There's, we were talking about it earlier. It's definitely the elections were the results of the elections are a result of how the left wing in Israel was not able to work together. There were so many inner fights there. Even after the elections, Meretz is blaming Labor is blaming Meretz is blaming like specific leaders. Within Labor, you have people accusing each other, and then Labor is accusing Lapid. Like, the whole thing is a mess. They weren't really united. And what you saw on the right wing with Likud and the right wing Zionist groups were very much working together and supporting each other, and that's why they received so much electoral power. I think that we are, in a sense, with some of the leaders that have been elected, we are going backwards a bit. And I'm being careful here as well, because we had in the recent government leaders from the Arab parties that are extremely homophobic and said homophobic remarks about Israeli LGBTQ folks, and had really backwards ideas about several minority communities in Israel, and really didn't represent the liberal democracies that we would think of. And they were still sitting in a left-wing government that they were able to be maintained. And I think it's the same. I hope that the same would happen with this government when Netanyahu, which I think is much more moderate than he presents himself, or at least the media presents himself. He's definitely right-wing, but I think he's a bit more moderate. I personally dislike him. That's just my politics, but we're not going to get into a fight about that. But I think that he's still more moderate, and I think that in the past, when he was, there were a lot of decisions that he hasn't made. Like, he keeps promising that he wants to attach the settlements or to expand settlements. And every time he was in power, he was really reluctant to do those things or to take those actions. And he always blamed the left-wing sects of the government and saying, this is the reason they don't allow me to do that. will be interesting to see what will happen with a right-wing government that will not allow him to do it. But we still have a few weeks that they're going to form it. Maybe it will include left-wing, more center-left parties to his coalition. That will be interesting to see. And there is this, when we're talking about Israeli elections, it's mostly about security. When we talk about left and right, it's mostly about security resolution. And I had an interesting conversation on Twitter with this British lady that was telling me, why do you need a Jewish majority state? And she's a member of parliament in the UK, and she really wanted, she was interested, that's why we had the conversation, but I thought it was ridiculous. The question, of course, we need that. But she said, but what's the problem if you have majority of Palestinians? Why would that be a problem? And then I went back to speak about my family, and I said, we lived as a Jewish minority. It didn't work out for us in 30 countries where we lived in different countries. And I think that is part of the reason that so many Mizrahi Jews in Israel are more nationalistic. While they can accept LGBTQ and they can accept, they don't want to force religion on other people. They're very traditional, very religious, very more religious than other secular groups in Israel. But they're not secular. It's complicated. But they are, but they're more liberal on so many issues, but when it comes to security and nationalism, they're very nationalistic, very caring about security in a positive way in Israel, I would say, because Israel is still a nation state that is very small in an imperial area, that countries surrounding us are very powerful. And I think that was what every election in Israel is about. And I think that's why many Mizrahim are voting for Netanyahu, because he represents this power and strength and security for them. Many of the Ashkenazi Jews in Israel are secular and more to the left, and they would be less interested in security. Of course, they care about security too, but by and large, and I'm speaking here in big terms, and it's a wide brush. But I hope it's just trying to give you a better understanding of it. So they would vote for a more center-left parties, and I feel like there's a feeling that this elections were around that issue. And it's interesting to see those results, but I'm hopeful, and I think that we had leaders with politicians in the last government that had questionable views, and the country didn't go backwards. So I'm hoping that will not be a change right now. I didn't support any of the parties that are going to form the coalition now. I'm very much on the left, although many in my community are in the Mizrahi Jews in Israel are to the right. But I'm accepting it because it's democracy, and I'm going to raise my voice and trying to make a change in a democratic way, and that's what it's about. It's important because being a Zionist meaning that you are going to support a country. You're not supporting government. You're not supporting politicians. You're not supporting Netanyahu or anyone in the government. You're supporting the country's right to exist and its people's right to exist, and treat them as human beings that are making decisions. And even in America, if you had a leader that you didn't like, I can't imagine that happening. But even then, you would work to make a change. And the same in the UK. We had 3 prime ministers in the last few months now, and we're still working to make a difference. So the point is, the last point is that we have to treat Israelis as human beings, as people that are going to live with they're going to make decisions, they're going to change their minds maybe later, and we're going to support the country's right to exist, because not only because it's our right and because it's our indigenous right, but because we also need a safe haven, and we need a place that the next time when the world turns on Jews, anywhere it is, that we have a place to go to, a safe haven for us.
What I've always wondered is with the term Semitic being such a much more broad envelope, besides Hebrew, Aramaic, Arabic, and again, if you take it back further, you go to Phoenician and maybe even Akkadian. How did we get so lucky? So when people start talking about anti-Semitic things, it automatically falls on a Jew's shoulder, instead of maybe looking at a broader scope of things. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I'm kind of pulling a blank on the term itself was invented to refer to Jews by I think it was a Nazi. I'll have to find it later, and maybe I can send it to you. But anti-Semitism was specifically describing hatred to Jewish people, and I think that it's important that we recognize that anti-Semitism, unlike racism, for example, or other forms of hatred, but racism is a good example. They're so different, and I think that the reason that we need to use the term anti-Semitism is because anti-Semitism is about completely destroying and erasing existence of any Jew on this planet. It's about killing every Jew. That's what anti-Semitism is, or it's in its core value is about killing all Jews. Racism is about slavery. It's about enslavement. It's about using those people in a way, colonizing them. It's not about killing. If killing is necessary for racism, it's also part of it. But I think that's the distinction. It's not about anti-Semitism. Is not about using Jews as a labor force for or enslaving Jews. It's not about that. It's about killing all of us. And I think that's why it's so unique in this sense. Doesn't mean that one is worse than the other, but just to understand that those are two different terms. And that's and I really think that it is an important distinction, and we need a term for this sort of hatred against us. Sometimes I do use anti-Jewish hatred, and I try to expand it because I know that not everyone understands the nuances. But yeah, I think you can call it whatever you want, but as long as you fight it.
Will you talk a bit about Israeli Arabs? Because a lot of people I talk to here, I'm in a lot of interfaith groups, Christians think that we're treating them terribly. I ask my relatives and friends in Israel, they won't talk about it. How are we how is Israel really treating Israeli Arabs? Are they really second-class citizens?
So no, they're not second-class citizens, Israeli Arabs, which are Palestinians that lived in Israel and are today make up 20% of the Israeli population, millions of people. And being Arab within Israel means that you are, and I spoke to you earlier about imperialism, you're part of the Arab Empire, but you are still a minority within a nation state. There's several other examples to it, like in Hungary, you have minority of Russians that are part of Hungary. They're still considering themselves Hungarians, but they are part of the Russian Empire, and they live in a nation state. And in the same way, Palestinians are part of the Arab Empire, but they live in a nation state as a minority of Arab Israelis. When we speak about multiculturalism in the West, I often hear people saying, well, my country or my city is so multicultural, we accept all those cultures. But I challenge that because I don't think that there is real multiculturalism in the West, because how much can people really express their cultural identity when, or using their language? In few generations, it's often erased. I'm seeing my British Indian friends that their parents came from India, but in third generation, they really are, their identity is so diluted, and it's very British, and they see themselves as British, and they're very English. They don't speak any of the language. They barely cook the food that their parents did. And I think in Israel, there's a real example of multiculturalism with Israeli Arabs because they have their own schools and they're able to maintain their culture and identity. They can, they study Quran, they speak Arabic, they do speak Hebrew as well, but they are able to maintain their unique identity. I think they are really treated probably the best in the Middle East from inside any other country. I think in my book, I quoted one of the statistics that there are more Arab Israeli teachers in Israeli academia than there are Mizrahi Jews teachers in the academia. And Mizrahi Jews are over 50% of Israeli Jews, which is a problem that we need to fight to change of Mizrahi Jews. But it tells you that Arab Jews are really treated so well because they have also preferred conditions to get into academia. There are quotas for in med school. That's why we have so many Arab Israelis doctors. There's quotas for Arab Israelis in pharmaceutical studies, or I'm not sure what it's called in English, but basically there's a lot of advancement for them. They don't have to serve in the army because they can do national service if they want to for 1 year, and that's enough for the government to consider them as fulfilling their mandatory duty. So yeah, and so that's how the country is treating them. Of course, there's the nation law, which was really, I think, very terrible law to make minorities feel like they're not belonging into Israel's Jewish state, or trying to remove Arabic from being one of the 3 official languages of Israel. But in terms of the day-to-day life and in terms of the rights that they have, I think they are treated very well. With that being said, there's still racism in Israeli society, just like in every society. As I said, Jews and Israelis are human beings. We suffer with the same challenges that every country suffers from. As I mentioned before, just the same sort of extreme rhetoric that made other leaders around the world come to power, made Israeli leaders come to power as well. So I think they're treated very well. I think treated very well. I'm saying it carefully because it's not that they are Israelis, and many of them would even say that they feel like there are more Israelis than they would prefer Israel over Palestine. According to several polls that have been released, they would prefer to live inside Israel if there was a two-state solution. So that tells me that there is equality. They're not. The answer is that they are not treated as second-class citizens. And I know because my grandparents and my parents were treated as second-class citizens in Arab countries. So I would be definitely against that.
Hen, I'd like to have you talk a little bit about social media. Social media is a new phenomenon, basically, right, over the last 2 decades. And I guess first I'll start with thanking you, because in many ways, to many of us that follow you, you're a 21st century Jewish warrior. You are fighting the good fight, and I think many of us take a lot of pride in that. I think also many of us avoid social media. Karen talked about it. The toxicity of social media is repulsive oftentimes, and it makes many of us want to stay away from it. But it is a platform that is not going away. So I guess I'd like to have you talk a little bit about, how you prepare yourself mentally, emotionally, psychologically to engage in social media, what that takes from you to participate actively against oftentimes what might be a tsunami of negativity, and then also any advice that you can give to the rest of us who maybe dabble in social media to share pictures of our dinner or our vacations or our dogs, but maybe don't quite have to engage in serious dialogue, because quite frankly, social media probably wasn't built to engage in serious conversation. But how can you, what direction or that could you give to those that, how can we get more engaged in social media? How do we find the strength to engage when it's an uncomfortable place to participate?
Yeah, that's an excellent 2 questions. I'll try and answer both of them. Social media companies make money by you being angry. Every time you get upset, they make $1. Someone in Silicon Valley is earning money. And that's why they want to keep you on the platform. And the way to keep you on the platform is to keep you angry. Because if you're not angry, you're not going to, the doom scrolling, when you keep going and reading all this terrible stuff that is happening, they need to keep you there. Because then you get advertisement and you stay on the platform. So always remind yourself of that. When you see something very upsetting, just remember that there's a reason that you're seeing it. It's not real. It is real, but it's not the consensus. It's not really what most people are thinking. It's probably just something very extreme that the social media networks are promoting for you to see. And the way they are doing it is, if you have a Facebook post and you get a like, and you get an angry comment, and you get an angry emoji, and then love one, and then sad one, the more different reactions you get, the more the post would show up, because they know people would feel something about it. They don't care if people will get upset, or actually, if the more upset they are, the more you get it presented on social media. So it's a very, the MO of social media networks is very negative. So I would that always scroll with being very aware of what you're on what environment you're at on social media. I would personally, I now have, well, professionally, I do have a team now at Tel Aviv Institute that we're working together on my social platforms, and I often send them comments from people, and I'm saying, guys, I really want to comment this, and they always tell me no. It really helps me, and everyone can have that. You can have a friend that you can send them something, some comments that you found, and ask them, should I comment? And ask them to be very fair and always tell you, mostly to tell you not to comment. Or even another thing I used to do was to have in my notes on my phone, just write a response that I would want to write to people, just not write it. The reason that I don't recommend commenting on or responding to trolls is because, first of all, that's what they want. They want you to be upset, and they want to get you to fight with them. So don't do that. Don't give them what they want. And the second thing is, what's the expression? Don't ever wrestle with a pig because you get dirty, and besides, the pig likes it. So you don't want to wrestle with trolls online because they really like it, and you're gonna get dirty. And it's always like that, because whenever I comment to someone that I know wants to like get me upset, then the next comment that they would respond to my comment would really get me upset, and I'll have to comment. And it also gives them a lot of attention. When you respond to people on your social networks, it shows that what they said was serious. And that's why I always avoid also, there's several anti-Israel Jewish voices online, and I try to avoid engaging with them at all costs, because when I engage with them, it means that me as Hen Mazzig, as someone that is seen by many in the Jewish community as a legitimate voice, I'm giving them attention, so maybe they are also legitimate if Hen Mazzig is speaking to them. And all of us, you're all Jewish. I mean, you're all probably on your platforms, people know that you're Jewish, and if you're getting into an argument with someone else, it means that you legitimize them as well, and you give them credit. But I think that it's important for us to be out there. I think that going back to all several of the comments that I said today, it's really about Jewish pride and about owning our identity. And just as much as you can invite people to come for Shabbat dinner, you can also post about your Shabbat dinner or post about the traditions in your family. There's so many beautiful traditions, and you know what? There's amazing food. I love Ashkenazi food, by the way. I don't know why some people are challenging it. There's so many amazing, I freaking love kugel. Maybe you should post about that and give a recipe of your grandparents, or show some Jewish culture, or teach a word in Yiddish or in Ladino or whatever language your parents have spoken on social media. I think that will make a massive difference. And it goes back to this, we're facing a dehumanization campaign, and the way to fight it is by humanizing Jewish culture and by showing that we are human, and that we're not just this whatever anti-Semites are trying to make us into being. And do it in a positive way. And yes, we need to fight anti-Semitism. And I promise you I would continue fighting, and I continue speaking up for our people. But I also want you to, this quote that is in my bio, I want you to promise to love being Jewish 10 times more than anyone hates us for it. That's it. Thank you so much.
So, Hen, thank you so much. Those in the audience, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So if you haven't given to the All-in-One campaign, please do so we can have excellent speakers like Hen. November 17th, we have Alana Spalding to speak with us. She's an expert on Ukraine, so that should be an interesting speaking engagement as well. So again, another round of applause for Hen for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
He does have a couple extra copies of his book, so we would encourage you to purchase those. I think he will sign the front cover as well if you ask him nicely. And we have refreshments in the Bookie Lodge before you depart tonight. So thank you all for coming. Those from Iowa City, thank you so much for driving the distance.
Thank you.
All right, so what about the health?
So what about gefilte fish? No, that's too much.